I didn't read the comic book.
We'll also talk about it.
Oh, same here.
No, I don't give a fuck.
Duncan, Idaho. Fuck you. That's my critique.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Longbox, guys. You're listening to Tom just curse randomly.
Yeah.
Tom loves tonight's subject.
Tom, how you doing? What are you drinking?
Hey, man, I'm drinking a very, very well-oiled Cuba Libre, which is more rum than soda, just so I can get through this episode, gentle people. How about you, Mikey? How you doing? What are you drinking?
I'm doing well. I am out of beer, so I'm just drinking root beer right now.
You wild man. Are you on Rum Springer?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Sure, why not?
Vodka Springer, whatever it takes.
Hey, Tommy, you kind of look like you're on Rum Springer in that shirt, man. What's going down?
Not much. I'm drinking some Grange-Stone single malt scotch. It is delicious, delicious scotch.
And Josh, I know you're the beer guy. What are you drinking down there, pal?
I have a beer called Phase from a new brewery I have recently had a couple beers from. They are Four Quarters Brewing in Winooski, Vermont.
Hey, I know where Winooski, Vermont is.
I know where Winooski is.
Yeah. It's not too far from Three Rivers.
Yeah, the beer's pretty good.
Yeah. I've been to Winooski.
Going up that way this weekend.
Yeah, this is their standard 6.5% New England IPA. It's perfectly passable beer.
It's pretty country up there too. I'll tell you that right now. When you said phase, was that with a PH or an F?
The PH.
Glad I asked.
Yeah.
Speaking of going through a phase, I used to love Dune when I read the books as a kid. Really captured my imagination. I love the first movie. I like the second movie, though it's a little confusing. My neighbor loves it. Loves Dune. It's this new Star Wars. It's this new Star Trek. It's
okay, hold on. I'm going to press a couple pedals on you here, Tom. By first movie, you mean the original production, what is 1980, whatever. And second movie, you mean the most recent iteration, which tells the same story, but only half so, because it's supposed to be two films, right?
Thank you for correcting me on that, because you're right. There was another one in the middle there that I ignore completely.
There's an HBO series.
Yeah, that's the one I'm ignoring completely because I didn't see it and I
it was terrible.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
I thought it was
I am talking about the one with Sting as my original and the one that
that's
just came out.
Yeah.
But trying to read this comic book was not fun for me in the least.
Wait, which comic book?
We're talking about the comic book that we are reviewing tonight for our book club, Dune, House Atreides.
Yeah.
Now, two of us didn't make it through this, but two of us did.
You sons of bitches.
I don't think
Mike,
anybody
did you make
made
it through it?
I did make it through it.
I did.
You read the whole thing? You guys are...
You got past a character named Duncan, Idaho in a space opera.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. I read the whole goddamn thing. You know what?
You, with a straight face, sat there and accepted as canon the name Duncan, Idaho. As not lazy writing, as not something stupid, as something that you accept, were willing to go along with, and got on with your life.
Yeah, where do you think they get the name Idaho from? It's from this character.
No one likes this side of you, Mike. All right, so Josh and I are going to tell you guys why we didn't make it through and where we tapped out. But if you guys like the comic, did you guys like the comic book?
No, nobody liked it.
They might have. Tommy, did you like this comic book?
No.
I mean, I didn't hate the comic. There's comic books that I've hated, and this one wasn't one that I hated.
So this is no marriage. This is no Marriage of North Star. Because you hate that comic book.
Oh, I hate that comic book with a passion. And no, this is no Marriage of North Star.
All right, so it's better than that. So where does it fall into? Give me like a 3 to 18.
It's probably like, I don't know, like 6, 7.
Why are we reviewing this? Mikey, 3 to 18.
I mean, it's slow.
Who chose
the nation chose it. Oh my God, I'm shitting on one of the Legionnaires.
One of our Longbox Legionnaires wanted this because it's their jam.
Okay, all right.
If you like Dune, it does tell a lot of backstory about some of the characters in Dune.
Poorly.
So what we're talking about, though,
the pacing is really slow. In this first volume, the pacing is really slow. If you continue on, it gets a little better in like some of the later books, because I continued on and read like the next 2 issues that were on Comixology.
Wait, the next 2 volumes, the next 2 issues. Wait.
There's
What's
2 volumes now. It's a comic book that was consolidated into trades.
Yeah.
So this is the first trade, and then I read the
I
second.
want to know how far you got.
He says
I
it's
read
the
the
second
first
trade.
trade. Read the first trade, and then I read 2 issues.
Oh.
Into the second trade. Okay.
Into the second trade.
Okay. All right.
I did
6
not
books
feel
in.
compelled to buy the comic book, but there
were
were 2 issues on Comixology Unlimited that I read.
So-
look, both trades were on Comixology this week, so
I didn't see this. The second trade was, well, the new Comixology app was asking if I wanted to buy the second trade, and I was like, "Fuck that! I don't want to spend
let's all
$13.59 on
pump
this."
the brake about the Comixology app, because we've already bashed it in the Patreon podcast, and I fully intend to do that again in this podcast. And matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna make a promise to all of our listeners. In our next podcast, I'm also gonna bash it again.
I
know.
probably
Unless they
will
fix it.
continue to
Unless
bash
they
it.
fix it.
They're not gonna
They'll
fix it.
it.
I mean, I know Amazon's not listening, but I'm just gonna tell you now, folks,
It's gonna take them years to get back to where they were
I'm angry.
if they fix it.
I'm an angry purchaser of comics right now.
So for our listeners, what we're talking about is the graphic novel adaptation of the best-selling novel by Brian Hebert, or is it Hebert? Hebert.
I don't know.
I honestly don't know.
And Kevin J. Anderson. So they adapted their novel into this new medium of graphic novel. It's set in the years, I'm reading right from the description, set in the years leading up to the Hugo and Nebula award-winning Dune, which inspired the upcoming featured film from Legendary Pictures. Dune, House Atreides transports reader to the far future on the desert planet Acheris, where Peridot Kynes seeks its secrets. Meanwhile, a violent coup is planned by the son of Emperor Elrond, and an 8-year-old slave, Duncan Idaho, seeks to escape his cruel masters, and a young man named Leo Atreides begins a fateful journey. These unlikely souls are drawn together, first as renegades, then as something more, as they discover their true fate to change the very shape of history. That is an exclamation point that really didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Sure they didn't.
I have some hard times sometimes with sort of the omnidramatic prequels to things, right? So it always seems, and I get it, right? It's that they always try to build up to these massive events, right? Where I feel like this is like people who make their D&D characters and they always have a tragic backstory, and nobody ever just like comes up in a normal way. And that's the kind of the characters we get stuck with, and it's just so convoluted and coming from so many different directions where you're just like, am I really to believe that the universe is this poorly created that all these things like happen to come together? I don't know. It just seems mishmash. The dialogue was not great. I really disliked the way they did panels in this book. Maybe it was just me.
Well, so here's a couple things about it. In addition to the panels, I thought the artwork was fine.
It was okay.
Yeah, it wasn't
great.
great.
It wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad.
It's fine.
The problem is in the novels, obviously there's a lot of exposition, giving you a lot more detail of everything that's going on. And so in the first Dune movie, from the 15 or 20 minutes I remember of it, before I fell asleep, there was a lot of thought bubbles in their head, but they were actually speaking, right? It was voiceover, where they were giving you the exposition that
Well,
would happen.
I mean, technically, he was basically watching documentaries, and we were looking over his shoulder.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there was exposition, but there really is just there's just no way to do Dune without exposition. It's impossible.
Right,
Like,
because you have to build that world.
It'd
But
be
they
27 movies, right? So they
don't
did the
do
best.
that in this graphic novel.
They don't, and they don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the medium is not set up for something that you need all this other background information on. If I'm sure if you guys have read the books and you still didn't like it. So like I have never read the books. I understood what was going on, but I didn't give a shit about any of these characters except for Duncan Idaho, and I didn't even know who the fuck it was until just before the podcast when I made the connection that it was fucking Aquaman. Like that's my reference point. Like, oh, that was Aquaman. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So in a lot of books, they do full page, just the written word, right? Where we have backstory, and this is definitely one of those books where you could have put a full written page at every chapter, even every half book, to give us backstory and information on the universe and places and things. Or a lot of books actually do it really well where they have like objects that are predefined or written about, right? Where you see this is the rifle of X, Y, and Z, and they give some history, and this is this object, and this is what they do. And Dune is rife with that amount of information. There's such a glut of world building done with Dune that it could have easily been put in here, but no, they just opted for like 9-panel pages. You couldn't even see the background, so they couldn't even world build behind characters in this book because they crammed people in to tiny frames, and it was not. I mean, the artwork, you're right, it was fine, but the position of information was just terrible.
And Dune is a very, very complex story. There are plans within plans in Dune. And when you're reading this story, you're getting the impression that you're not going to find out until book 30 what any of the plans are, because this is going so slow. It's just the pacing is really, really slow in these first books. And if they're not going to give you the exposition and tell you what's going on, then they really need to like increase the pacing early on to draw you in, and they're not doing that.
Yeah, we always, a lot of times on the podcast, we talk about exposition as the enemy, right? And so there's a couple of ways we need to get around that, right? Especially in comics. So there's the visual medium, right, where the artists can define what's going on by what's happening in the background and what we see. But there's also, I'm not always sure that those sort of novelized pages I would consider exposition instead of backstory, or right. It's not like people or dialogue like hearkening back to things that aren't particularly relevant, where we feel like we're just getting jammed in the eye with like flashbacks. I think there's a certain amount of leeway, right, for comic creators to have a large amount of dialogue or description or something, and not feel like we're not getting murdered by that as we move into the story and the action and the visuals. And those are things that as creators and as the, I don't know, you would say the producer, the person who's actually making those decisions, what goes into the comic, have failed us dramatically in this book, right?
Yes, I concur.
Yeah,
I mean, comics are limited to your imagination. You can do whatever you want in this medium, and they chose to just not use it to the best of its abilities.
So So I think one of the things we don't talk about often is so when creators are putting these books together, right? Instead of movies or films or TV, we have an artist, a writer, but who, I mean, at some point it bubbles up to somebody who is essentially the producer, right? Somebody who puts everything together. And who was it on this book? Like, who fell, right?
What was who even produced this? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. And so, like, a lot of times when we read, especially the monthlies, right? You have, you have an artist, a writer, and an editor, and who does that really fall on from a creation process? Is there someone who's elevated to be in charge that I don't know about?
Patton Oswalt has a great bit about a guy who works at a magazine called Piss Drinkers. And every month they crank out that magazine called Piss Drinkers. And every month the editor has to really care about the layout. And he's got to go in there screaming at people, look, this episode of Piss Drinkers is the worst one we ever put out. You didn't even line up the pages right. And you didn't use fast enough film. You can only kind of see the P. We want that P to pop. And the artist is like, oh man, I thought the P would be more metaphorical. And at the end of the day, it's the editor that takes a look at it and says, this flies or this doesn't fly, or maybe we have to go in a different direction, guys.
But I mean, we say that, but I don't know if that's true.
Well,
Because at the end of the day, go ahead, Mike.
this was put out by Boom Studios. That was the publisher, and they have the advantage of having the actual author of the book as one of the creators, right? So I think that causes a problem also, right? Because that's the creator, it's his baby. Do you want to go in and say, yeah, this isn't good, you got to fix this? And maybe not.
So also, when you've got an author that's used to writing 2-inch thick books, to go from writing a book that's, dense and thick and complex, sometimes is a hard adjustment to changing mediums.
And also there's the beats, right? Because you want to have each issue end on a kind of a cliffhanger. Sure. To get the reader to want to read the next issue. But that's not something when you're writing a novel you really have to concern yourself with. When the chapter ends, person's going to go on to the next chapter. Regardless, you don't have to have a specific, okay, I have to have at page 32, I got to have the story, a story break right there. That'll be a cliffhanger for the next book, right?
Unless you're Tolkien and they're like, this can't be one book. Get their shit up. What the fuck's wrong with you? Yeah, I mean, but at some point somebody has to bubble up through that whole process and look at this and say, there's either not enough information or there's too much information, and it needs to be like you are creating things that where if there is no inherent knowledge of what you're talking about, it's just reckless art with words, right? There's no backstory. There's no information.
And you're talking to 4 people that know some backstory, right? We've all read Dune. Granted, some of us haven't read it in 30 years.
Well, no, I think that's not true for this book, right? I mean, it's a year old.
But I'm just
so
saying,
it came out right around Dune. No, you're right. In this group, yeah.
We've all read Dune, and some of us couldn't even get through this book.
Yeah.
It does have really good
we
user
all
reviews.
Had the backstory, and half of us couldn't get through this book.
I do, yeah.
On Comixology, it has 77% 5-star reviews. And when you scroll through those reviews, they are all Dune fans who are like, "Oh, this is what I wanted." So
right.
Obviously,
it gives you backstory to characters that you already know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people who are reading this are real fans of Frank Herbert.
Sure.
And maybe this book is for them and not for us. Maybe it's for people who love the Dune books and they're new to graphic novels and they this is fine for them. That's okay too. It just wasn't for me coming from I like graphic novels point.
I've got to say, I like the 2 issues after this trade much better than the trade, and I think it's just because like the pacing in it is so slow, and the action starts after all of this, like even more backstory, if you will, happens. It's just such a slow beginning, and Dune is not like the quickest action film ever, right? I mean, it's not. It's a dense story. And to have something that starts out this slow and put it into a comic book form, which is not meant to be slow, it's difficult. So
I'm not saying it wasn't a hard project.
I'm just saying I don't know that it was necessarily well done either. Like I think a lot of it had to do with the way they paced it. Because like I said, like the 2 issues I read after this were much better. And yeah.
They also had another option of telling the whole story in a graphic novel and not going with single floppy issues month after month after month, and then just binding just 4 at a time together to release volumes of this. They could have just gone with just one graphic novel.
Yeah, it would have been, I think, if they had taken their time and paced themselves and put some real gravitas into like an introduction and some information at the beginning of this, it would have gone a long way. Also, I'll just say a lot of what impaired me here was Amazon's horrible implementation of Comixology. As it's, I read on my PC. My iPad has aged out. My Kindle's a Paperwhite for reading regular print. And so I read Comixology on my PC, and everything right now is unreadable.
And if you want to hear more about our rant on Comixology, go over to our Patreon only podcast called The Geek Leak, where we talk about it in depth. For just $1 a month, you can get an extra podcast from us. Just about every week we do a podcast called The Geek Leak. It's at patreon.com/the Longbox, guys. And all the money we get from our Patreon account does not go to us. It goes to the Elizabeth Peabody House, the food bank, right, Tom?
That's right. The Elizabeth Peabody House's food bank. They feed up 100+ people a week now. We've had a little influx over at the food bank, and I've been told by a couple of relief agencies that we should be expecting some more people from the Ukraine starting this week. So we have that to look forward to. But all that money really does go to the Elizabeth Peabody House Food Bank, and they are very appreciative of our efforts. Your efforts, really.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable expectation for Mike to dodge me out of this complaining thing again, but fuck that. God damn it.
Damn it.
No. No, it's like
you're lucky that Comixology is not our sponsor. But Comixology, if you're listening, and we know you're fucking not, we can be bribed and we will sing your praises because, ethics.
Hey, let's face it, we're going to have a problem with Comixology and L7 for a while. These 2 enemies of ours are not going away.
And Andy Dick.
We used to have a great love of Comixology. Now, not so much. Not so much.
I can't wait to go play with it tonight. Now, I read some from my library yesterday. I didn't even notice any changes. But I wasn't. I was just
not notice changes, Tom.
I just pulled up my page on the last comic book I read. I read a couple pages and went to bed. I didn't notice.
It didn't force you. It didn't. When you opened up the app, it didn't force you into an upgrade. It didn't like almost in a salty sort of way say you need to upgrade now.
I'll just say go ahead and try to read anything on your PC tonight.
I never read on my. I don't even know how to do it on my PC. I don't read comics.
Literally, when I went into the app, it said you must upgrade now. It did not give me a choice. It did not let me continue reading what I was reading. Every single device I picked up, it was like, you need to upgrade now. You can't read what you can't use the old app.
I gotcha. Let me see ya. All right, final words on House Atreides. And let me go first by saying it wasn't for me, but I did go over and talk to my friend Tony, who loves everything Dune right now, and he liked it. He said, "Oh, I'll read the rest of this later." Thank you, Tom. And I think he downloaded Comixology just to get it, which might have been a curse. And he loved it. He's a big Dune fan, so maybe it just wasn't for me, but it's certainly for my neighbor.
I mean,
I'm
if you can get
hoping
past
it
the
gets
missing
better.
words, if you can get past the missing words and you know the characters well enough to sort of project that into comic book form and not worry about backstory or exposition, I think you're okay. The artwork's fine. Dialogue is pulled directly from novels. I think it'd be okay. If you are somebody who's like, you know what, I think I would like to learn more about Dune before I see the next part of the movie, but I've never read the books, you should go spend some time doing something else.
You should
Yeah, go read the
go
books.
read the book.
Yeah, go
Go
read the
book,
books.
Dune.
See if you like them.
Go read the book, Dune, and you'll be happier. Yeah.
Go do
It's too
that.
I
bad
mean,
that didn't work out better, because this comic book really was exactly that. It was supposed to be a prequel to get people energized for the movie.
I mean,
Not
I love
enervated.
Dune. I love Dune, and I had to slog my way through this comic book.
All right. Mikey, did you
But-
ever give your last word on this?
Man,
I hate gucking anyone's yum. I'm glad people like this. It just lost me kind of quick. Moving on, Mikey, what do you have at the front of the long box?
at the front of the long box, I want to clean all your palettes. Let's go over to one of the it's probably the best duo in comics, and that's Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Read another one of their graphic novels this week. It is Velvet. If you have ever watched a James Bond movie and thought, I bet you Moneypenny can kick some ass, then this is the book for you, because they take the Moneypenny character and you find out that she's not just there as a secretary. She's a fucking badass spy in her own right. And yeah, it's an excellent series. Everything that Brubaker and Phelps do is amazing. So you should definitely check it out. It's Velvet. There are 3 volumes. The first 2 volumes tell the story of it gives her background, and while at the same time telling a story set in the present day, where she is trying to find a traitor or a mole within her agency. So, well done, as always, by that team.
Clap, 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 clap. I'll read that. I like the character Moneypenny. I always like the name, and I like female spies. I love Danger Girl. I'm going to give this a shot. Tommy, boy, brother, what do you got at the back?
I have Downward to the Earth. This is by Philip Theroux and Laura Zuccari. It is a sort of a reimagining of Robert Silverberg's novel, Downward to the Earth. It is very beautifully drawn, very imaginative backdrops. It is a story of a man who is a colonizer on this planet that has now become decolonized. He goes back after 8 years. His world, after going back to Earth, just seems kind of flat. So he goes back to this planet that he was once one of the colonizers of, to witness this rebirth ceremony that no humans are supposed to ever witness. But he intends to kind of sneak his way in with a group of scientists who want to sort of film it and take it down, etc. and so forth. And it's just a kind of the journey of the story is really the story. And it's, like I said, very beautifully done. The dialogue's pretty good. It's kind of a sort of story about growth of a person. And it's just, like I said, it's a very beautiful book. So
It's by Humanoids, which is a European comic publisher. So
Yeah.
they do a lot of
it's
very pretty books.
And the Robert Silverberg novel is supposed to be about transcendence, and it gets a lot about that. A lot of sort of these aliens that go through this ritual where they sort of go into a trance and don't remember anything that they've done, and go into this whole system of rebirth and transformation. And the whole book is about sort of transforming and changing yourself. So it's good in a 70s sort of hippie way.
I'm a 70s hippie kind of guy. All right. Josh, sweet Josh, happy-go-lucky Josh. What do you got for me as a tangent?
Yeah, it's not happy-go-lucky today. I don't know. Like I'm having a worry week. I'm not feeling grounded this week.
Let me give you one bit before you go on. Let me give you one bit of good news that might help you out.
Sure.
Okay.
Justin Timberlake has just volunteered to go fight in the Ukraine. He's going to be stationed right next to the Crimea River.
Wow.
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 Come on! If you can't find humor in the death of thousands of Ukrainian citizens, where can you find it? Come on!
I don't know. Where was he?
Is he going to bring the boys back home?
I don't know if that's a joke or not because I don't know any of his songs. Stop it.
I don't believe there is a song called The Boys Back Home.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what's going on here.
You could just say random words and I still wouldn't get the joke.
Tommy
So
pretended
true.
froze there because he just didn't want to deal with that shit joke. All right, Josh, give us a tangent.
Where was I going? I mean, it's tangential, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think where are we? February 28th, 2022 here. Russia invades Ukraine's first big land war in a while, and it's
it's the first land war in Europe in our lifetime.
I mean, you never want to get into a land war in Asia, which we've learned this pretty quickly from film, TV, movies, history, and yeah, it's disturbing. It's one of those things where you're like, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. It's definitely a global shakeup. So, I mean, and I'm gonna go out and say, for me, my first global shakeup, and just share yours, was Challenger in '84, right? Like that was the first thing that really shook me to my core as a kid growing up. Like that's something I really remember. So what was the first thing, and it could be comic or history, or the first thing that really just like set you on a path in a different direction, that wasn't related to your family, your town? Like how big did it get before you found something that like gave you that little kick?
I'm looking up the year because I want to be. For me, I'll go first. You guys might be a little too young, but in the 70s, I'm a little bit older than you guys, not by much, but I remember the 70s a little bit better than you guys. You guys remember the 70s at all?
At the
Little
end,
bit.
very, very
A
end
little
of the
bit.
70s.
Do you guys remember license plates being used to get gas? You don't.
Nope.
All right, good. So let me.
I do remember long lines during the fuel crisis.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. So during the 1970s, we had a huge fuel crisis where everything kind of changed. We didn't know if we were going to have enough gasoline to fuel America anymore. That's how bad it felt. If you had an odd number on your license plate, you could get it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And if you had an even, you got it on the other days. So they were checking your license plates to make sure you were going to the gas station on the right day. The lines would be blocks and blocks long because people were afraid that they weren't going to be able to fuel up next time. And they were definitely afraid that there wasn't going to be enough fuel to make it for the 2 days where it was. And it was all mental. This fuel crisis was kind of made by OPEC at the time and a little bit brought on by our own hubris. Jimmy Carter gave the very famous Malay speech, which pretty much tanked him as a president. Greatest ex-president, I think, of all time, but not one of the greatest presidents of our time. Ex-presidents, he's up there.
I mean, I'll argue for Carter, but
that's what I said. Carter. We're talking about Jimmy Carter.
I know. I'm gonna argue for Carter as a better president than most people perceive him as. So.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying he was a terrible president. I'm saying he was the greatest ex-president ever, but an okay president. He did keep us out of a lot of stuff, which is kind of hard to think. But yeah, that was the first thing for me. Those gas lines and everyone being afraid that we were going to run out of fuel, and we really kind of thought the American way of life was changing, and it was a weird time.
Yeah, for me, I think it was the Iran hostage crisis.
At the same time.
Yeah, because
right, which Carter solved and the Canadians took credit for, right? So.
Yeah, that's the
Reagan took credit for it.
Oh, right.
Well, that's because they illegally sold Iran arms, or parts for all the old planes, so that way they could illegally fund the Contras and go against Congress's orders. But that's a whole nother story. But no, the hostage crisis, I remember watching that. But actually, I think that was my first time, the world, it seemed important, because my parents, they read the newspaper and they watched the news every day, but when that came on, we had to shut up because they were talking about something important. So that kind of made me think, oh, well, my stuff outside of my immediate life affects things.
Yeah.
So I was a small person, and I was a small person when this happened, but it kind of shook me up when I believe it was 9 people died at a Who concert because of general admission tickets. That freaked me out.
Really?
Yeah.
They got crushed, right?
Yeah, it was terrible.
Got crushed.
WKRP
I want to say it was
did
in
a very
Cincinnati,
special
I
episode
think.
about it. Yes. WKRP had a whole episode about it.
And it may not have been Cincinnati. It may just have been on WKRP. That was why I associated with Cincinnati.
I think it was actually Chicago.
Yeah. I think it was somewhere in the Midwest.
Yeah.
But it kind of freaked me out because I always liked The Who and wanted to see The Who. And yet people were dying seeing The Who. And that was, I think, the first big thing little thing that kind of shook me up.
Yeah, it was a big thing. 9 people lost their lives. That didn't shake me up too much. It didn't really register on my radar as that, but I can see how it would affect.
Because it was just so unexpected.
Yeah.
It's like people going to see a show, and 9 of them didn't make it out.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Well, great topic, Josh.
Yeah, thanks.
Way to bring that to the podcast. Let's bring it up. Let's each tell one of the things we loved about Pensacon.
There was so much to love. There was a lot to love about Pensacon this year. We had a great time.
I'll go first on the Steel LTs. I loved our game show, Last Nerd Standing.
Oh, God, that was so
We had prizes. Almost everyone who went to Last Nerd Standing got a prize. Almost everyone. I wish if we hadn't let the late people in, everybody would have gotten prizes.
Mikey, if we didn't let those late people in, we wouldn't have been able to shame them.
That's true.
That's right. It would have been a riot. Let's face it. It would have been a riot if we didn't let those people in. I really enjoyed karaoke. Karaoke this year was great. We had this one guy who might as well have been made of pork. He was such a ham. And he did Cab Calloway's Minnie the Moocher. He did a phenomenal job. Even did a little dance number during it. That was a good time to me. We had to improvise a little bit and change the show around just a smidge. We were doing Once More with Feeling, and we found out that the audience had aged out of that. Most of those kids out in that audience had no idea what Buffy the Musical was and did not give a rat's ass about doing it. They wanted to sing in Kanto songs, which we changed over
Dr. Horrible.
Both. It was both. I asked them if they wanted to do any of those two musicals, and everyone was like, no, thanks. I'm like, all right, we've aged out of Dr. Horrible.
And yet they loved the Time Warp.
They did. The Time Warp, I guess, is a little more timeless. Everything was good about that one. How about you, Mikey? What was your favorite memory? Boy, that's right. You stole LT's. That's why I thought it was you. LT, what was your favorite memory?
I just really had a good time moderating the panels that we got asked to do at the last minute.
I was going to say, your panel, you did a great job on your panel.
I was a little apprehensive about both my panels because the first one was the first panel and it wasn't very heavily attended, but the people that did attend seemed to really have a good time. I know I had a good time talking to the artists. And then the other panel I did, I was getting a little nervous because people were not having questions. And I really thought it was a panel that was going to be geared towards people just having questions and wanting answers. But it ended up going really well. So, but I had a good time, as always, talking to artists, which I haven't done in a couple of years now.
So I'm going to jump in with one more. Love seeing old friends. We saw so many of our friends that we see every single year. Diane, her boyfriend, the nice ladies that always come to all of our panels. I can't remember all their names. We made new friends. Who does the podcast for
those fairies came to all of our panels.
Those gorgeous, great costumed fairies.
They were dressed as fairies. We are not being pejorative.
Like literal wings, people.
Literal wings. I think they were actually doing Tinkerbell and some of the other ones from the new Tinkerbell little TV show. It was terrific. Josh, how about you? You had a great time. You looked so good with your mutton chops.
Yeah, nobody recognized me. It was terrible. Anyway.
You chose Sebastian Shaw, one of the most obscure Hellfire clubs.
I was with Emma Frost the whole show. Not a single person guessed who I was. Anyway.
That's because no one was looking at you.
Yeah, your girlfriend was still on the show in that white queen outfit.
Fair.
I didn't even know you were there.
I had two things going on. One was our interaction with Judge Reinhold, which was amazing.
Hilarious. You want to do it real quick?
I'll tell that story real quick. So Tom was run up to, it's Matt Kuchner, right?
Right.
From SNL and every Will Ferrell movie. And we were going to go do the Bill Brasky skit. And it was sort of wedged into the corner. And we had been doing trivia on the drive down from Atlanta to Pensacola. And some of the trivia we had done was about Judge Reinhold, who I had really seems like a nice enough guy, but I had really no interest in meeting him or rushing off to his booth, get anything done. But we just happened to be there. And of course, Reinhold was closing up for the night. And so I looked over my shoulder. I'm like, Reinhold. He's like, yeah. What was your first television appearance? And he's like, it was a Wonder Woman episode. I'm like, absolutely. What was the title of the episode? And he's like, I have no idea. Like, I don't remember that. And the woman who's on the opposite side of him goes, Amazon Hot Wax. And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely. And I'm like, how did you remember that? She's like, I'm his wife. I actually remember things about his career. So it turns out Amy's actually the star of that couple. Reinhold looks like shit. She looks fucking fantastic. She knew the answers to all of our shit. She was so good. But then Reinhold jumps in right afterwards and he's like, even more embarrassing than that was my second credit. He's like, so I was on the pilot for Magnum PI. And Tom Selleck, he's like, I was playing a Navy person, and I was supposed to stop Tom Selleck from getting onto the ship. And so Selleck was supposed to like get past me somehow, but they didn't really write it into the script in any way. So Selleck had come straight from the chow line, and he had a bowl full of food. And so it looks like, and he just was like, whatever. and just played it off. They filmed it. He handed me a bowl of food. I took that as my bribe, and I just started eating it. And so Selleck sneaks onto the ship after providing me food, and my on-screen credit is chicken eating semen.
Because he was in the Navy.
Because he was in the Navy. So yeah, and it was a bowl full of whatever chicken, chicken and rice. And I was like, wow, that is embarrassing. Thank you for that story. It was kind. And it was and he was just honest and funny. And we had
real guy.
Honestly, yeah, he was just a real guy. And honestly, at the beginning of the con, I had no interest in meeting him. But we all rallied and went back there the next day and had our picture taken with him. And
Big group picture.
And his wife Amy, who was absolutely fucking delightful.
And I think Judge Reinhold could give a lesson to other celebrities there. I saw some celebrities who had no interaction with people, who just sat there like just kind of were plants in a corner, and people weren't coming up and talking to them or doing anything with them except they're hardcore fans. And like Judge Reinhold didn't like try to win us over. He was just a genuine nice guy, and that made us want to go talk to him.
It was. And so, but I think my absolute favorite moment was I did get to do a manage a panel, and on that panel was comics for kids, and the big person on that panel was a Guy Gilchrist, if anybody's familiar. So he worked with Jim Henson for 30 years. He did the comic strip Nancy for 20 years. If you see any representation of Muppets, the Muppet Babies, Fraggle Rock, anything that was not a physical Muppet that was translated to TV, comics, cartoons, anything, that was Guy Gilchrist. He's the heavyweight of Jim Henson's creations that are not puppets. And it was nice to have that conversation with all those folks. I thought the panel went really well, and I told the panel at the time that I have a familial connection to that, where my grandfather did Archie and Mighty Mouse, and Guy Gilchrist actually remembered my grandfather. Yeah. So I was very appreciative of that, and just the idea that somewhere in my family legacy there are people who are more famous, and
it was terrible that he said that son of a bitch owes me $5, but still nice.
Yeah, still nice. It was really the heartfelt moment for me. It was really nice.
It was weird because you had mentioned it at the panel, and they were like, "Oh, then you have every right to be moderating. You should be one of the panelists with us." And I was like, "I don't think they understand how comics work. Just because his grandfather did comics does not make him a comic book artist."
It does not.
Bill Finger's granddaughter sometimes sits on panels, and she doesn't even like comic books. And we've seen her on panels going, "I don't know much. I remember it was nice."
I mean, it was definitely nice of them to say that, and it was nice for everyone. And there was the daughter of Bill there on the panel, who was like, her first panel ever, and it was just a familiar connection. It was nice that they recognized that. It was nice that Guy Gilchrist even had any idea who my grandfather was pretty cool. And I like when we get called on by the con to go do those things. It's really nice, and it was cool. It's good.
No, we were busy that day. A lot of people said Saturday was the busiest day, but we were so busy we hardly even noticed it was crowded.
It was nice. I get there was a lot of organizational stuff, like midday on a couple of the days, and people were having a hard time. And honestly, I felt like there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh my God, the trade floor was so packed," and I was like, "No, you haven't been to any other con in your entire life if you think that was a trade."
You haven't been to San Diego Comic Con, that's for certain.
You haven't been to Boston Comic Con pre-COVID. They'll pack you in like cattle.
A Comic Con, right? Like,
yeah.
I felt like there were a lot of first timers there who didn't know what they were to expect. And don't get me wrong, it was pretty tough without the hotel and spreading things out over like sort of the course of the town, but I don't know.
But I
All
will
in all,
say,
did a good job.
I think it worked because we spent a lot more time at the restaurants downtown
That's
than
true.
normally.
It's
Like we
true.
would just go over to Whataburger usually and just grab something quick, where so we could get back to the con. This time I didn't feel like we were rushing. Like we didn't have to go other than do our panels. Like everything else we did was kind of at our own pace.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they need to. Well, they need to cut out the location that was close to our Airbnb. That needs to go away, right? It was just in the opposite direction of everything,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there was no need
Yeah.
for it. I think if they kept everything in or on around Palafox, except for the floor, I think that'd be fine. I think they did a good job. I think they need to pick up a couple of more restaurants, bars, and whatever to do specific and open events, so that
That'd be nice.
people feel like they have a place to go. Because they were nice enough to give us 30 minutes between shit, because of which was, for all intents and purposes, the recognition of a lack of good organization, right? They're like, we're not sure people are going to know where they need to go, so we're going to give people a lot more time this year.
Yeah, in between
And-
the panels, there was always a 30-minute buffer, which was also good because a lot of times the panelists
Weren't there.
were coming
Oh,
from the convention center to get there, and they were getting there late.
So what they needed to do was have a bunch more of the local restaurants and bars with things in between panels, right? So people have a place to go. Celebrities have a way to get there, have the time to get there, and we don't feel like we're just standing around, like shuffling around the street for 30 minutes, right?
You don't shuffle anywhere. You power walk wherever you go.
And when I get there, I drink like a motherfucker, and that's how I roll. And I just want that everywhere I go.
Maybe we should move our Last Nerd Standing to your friend's bar.
We could do that.
5 Barrel, they would love to do Last Nerd Standing, I bet.
I'm sure he would.
Yeah. And let me just say this. Josh is a notorious fast walker. White so fast. I was so happy to see those bird scooters. I downloaded the app, jumped on those birds whenever I had to walk anywhere with Josh.
They're great.
They're terrific.
Yeah.
I didn't break my neck. I almost broke my neck once, but I didn't break my neck. Did anyone else try the bird scooter?
I mean, I've ridden them everywhere, especially the most money I spent on it was Gen Con in Indianapolis. I didn't take a cab anywhere. I fucking drove those things everywhere. It's great.
They're kind of fun. I like them.
Yeah, they're fun.
I like them.
Nice.
All right, I guess that brings us to plugs. We've been put in for at least one other con coming up.
Yeah.
Mike,
Awesome Con.
What is it?
Awesome Con in DC.
All right.
All right.
That's a drive for me and Josh. And LT.
Let's get that done.
LT, you got anything to plug over there, buddy?
I'd like to plug geekorthodox.com.
Geekorthodox.
Geekorthodox.com.
Hello, Timmy.
Geekorthodox.com, purveyor of fine t-shirts and other geeky things such as stained glass prints, baseball shirts, baseball caps, socks, you name it, they got it. Geekorthodox.com.
And Ian, if you're listening, there's a problem at geekorthodox.com. It's hard to order any of your shirts right now. So you might want to take a look into that.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, this comes out like a week later. We should.
Yeah, maybe we should email him that one. Maybe I'll give him a little buzz on the old Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to order a birthday present for Tom from geekorthodox.com because I know he loves it.
I do love everything about geekorthodox.com. Josh, just call him. I'm thinking about
it. What's the problem? Like, I'm gonna just call him.
I like what's the thing I like over here? Hotbox Pizza. Hotbox Pizza in Somerville. If you're looking for a pizza, Hotbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like those guys.
I would like to thank Kirby Crackle, who provide our geek rock music every week. You can check them out at kirbycracklemusic.com. If you're listening to this podcast, you already have heard Kirby Crackle at the beginning of the
Ian.
Hold on, I guess we're talking to Ian, huh?
Yeah, I got you on speakerphone, and we're on the podcast, and Mike is having a problem ordering T-shirts from the site. What's the problem, Mike?
Problem is, there's no way to select a T-shirt. You click on apparel, it doesn't go to apparel. It says there's an error.
I can't hear him.
You can't hear him? Hold on.
No, because you're
Okay.
wearing headphones, Josh. And you're
Oh,
holding
shit.
a phone.
Josh, you drunk son of a bitch. Say it again, Mike.
Hey, Ian,
Oh,
when I
yeah.
click on apparel, it
hear
gives
him
me
now?
an error message.
No, I can't hear you. I just heard you.
Okay. This is terrible.
This is terrible. This is good podcasting right
I've
here.
been drinking, and we're on the podcast, but Mike can't order T-shirts from your site.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but yeah, I mean, I can't hear Mike, but have him get in touch with me, and I'll figure out what's going on. Every once in a while, there's some back end thing crops up, some patch rolls through and breaks connections or something. So yeah, thanks for letting me know there's a problem. If you can get me a little more information, I'll figure out what's the issue.
Well, thanks, Ian.
We will figure it out, and we will provide you more information.
Yeah,
and I will drink more.
Like email
and that
me
will,
or text me or whatever else, and let me know what's going on, and
I
I'll
think
get it corrected.
Yeah, I think if I drink more, it's gonna help more.
Yeah.
That is the
Yeah.
the answer to some questions.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The
let's give it up
cause
for Ian Leno.
Ian Leno, special guest. Yay! Alcohol, the beginning and solution to most of our problems. Alcohol. I like to think alcohol.
Did that work at all?
No.
It did not. It did not. It would be horrible. If you're
No.
watching this
And
on
now,
YouTube,
For
we
some
have a
reason, I
podcast, by
can't
the
hear
way.
people.
If
I don't know
you're
what's going on.
listening to us on the podcast, we have a YouTube channel. Go subscribe to that too. We actually get a bunch of new subscribers to our YouTube channel after Pensacon.
Sweet.
Neat.
Yeah.
All right. I think
By the
that's
way,
all.
I'd also like to thank all our listeners in China. We get 100 to 150 downloads of a podcast from China. And I know I've been contacted by one guy who lives in Hong Kong, but the only way he can listen to us is by watching us on YouTube. But thank you to all our Asian fans. I did not realize we were going to be this big in China.
I thought we were going to be big in Japan.
I knew you were going to make that joke before this. And
Yeah.
I've been to Japan. I am big in Japan. You know where I'm
Me
also
too.
big? The Philippines. I'm like Godzilla walking around the Philippines. They're tiny people is what I'm trying to say. They're tiny
Ooh,
people.
little fellas.
Yeah, I think we.
All right. I think that'll do it for us. Mikey, what is this podcast like to you?
It's like Drunk History, but for comics.
Tommy, sweet Tommy. Any last words?
Apparently, this podcast is like a cure for gigantism for Mikey in Japan and the Philippines.
And Josh, one more beer. Is that your sector? At least
No,
one more?
I'm not. Yeah, at least one more. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my sector tonight. I'll find out if I have a job tomorrow. That'll be my sector.
Neat.
Awesome.
All right, guys, I love you. And don't forget what I always say. Don't just what you hate, just promote what you love. You're going to live longer. Thank you so much for the Longbox, guys.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.